Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'm going to be going through how I water Lepanthes, and then I'm also going to go through how I fertilize them as well, because I don't think I've done that in the past. Before I get started with the video, I want to remind everyone about the Discord server. If you haven't been here before, it's a sort of forum / group chat with other pleurophthalid growers. Trying to build an online community of people who grow these things. So the link for that will be in the description below, and it's free. It's just a great place to connect with other people. And let's get on with the video. Okay, I think the first place to start with this kind of video is the type of water to use, and then also what I use to water it. So I typically use reverse osmosis water or distilled water, so I just make it in like a big jug like this. You don't want too many minerals in your water, because when the water evaporates it leaves behind those minerals in your substrate, and over time that can burn your roots. And so low mineral content water, if you live in an area that has really low mineral content water, then you can probably just use your tap water. If you grow carnivorous plants, you probably use the same water used for that. I'd say probably don't want something with a higher TDS of probably 50 ppm. Just get a water hardness tester or something like that. So that's the first thing. Second thing is when you start getting a lot of mounted things, I used spray bottles. Let me show you something like this. Just a normal spray bottle. But this motion, there's liquid in here. This motion of cranking out, if you gotta do this 100 something times every day, it can you're gonna get carpal tunnel or something in your wrist. And so instead I use something like this. It's just like a pump spray thing. I guess I'm not tied to any particular company, but this one's VivoSun. So what you do is you just pump this up. I obviously can't do this in midair. You pump it up, and then the water pressure goes through this thing. So I like to just pump this up before I get into the plants. Alright, so now I will go a little bit deeper into the actual watering part. Okay, here we are, looking at a couple of Lepanthes here. And you can see that they are growing with very little substrate around the roots. So one thing I like to do is to let things dry out over the course of one day. And so I'll water things, and then by the next day I want them to be not bone dry, but maybe 25% saturated with water or so. You'll find online a lot of people using the term evenly moist. And so there's no real consensus of how that's to be interpreted. My interpretation is you want the plant to remain moist but not wet throughout the day, and the best way to do that is for it to be able to dry over a 24-hour cycle. And so there's kind of two ways to achieve this. The first, of course, is to just not water that much, but then that becomes really hard to gauge. And so what I tend to do is, as I pointed out earlier, I put not very much substrate around the roots. You see here. And then what you can do is you can saturate that every time you water, and then because there's not that much substrate, it'll dry in time for the next day. I've also switched to live, using some live moss lately. I don't recall if I pointed that out in a previous video for some of these Lepanthes, and you can see. So this is the morning. I'm filming in the morning. Let me turn this fan off. One second. Okay. I'm filming in the morning, and the thing I want to point out to you is when this live moss is not wet, it kind of dulls out in color. Okay, that's not a good example. But in person, this is not as green. I'll just point that out. It's more like this. See, it's like a kind of pale gray color. So it's not crispy dry, but it's still it's not saturated with water. And then what I'll do is I will let me get my thing. We'll just start from the top. I'll take my little misting thing, right? And then just let it saturate with water. And then it also spills down, you see that? And I'll go through every plant like this. When I'm not filming, this usually takes probably 5 minutes for all my 100 plus plants. But yeah, so you just want to make sure you're wetting it. And then the other important thing to make sure is that it's actually soaking in. Sometimes things can be a little dry. You'll have to come back to it after you wet it a little bit in the beginning. But you can see a lot of these are changing colors because they're absorbing more water. See, this one I needed to spray a couple times because it's struggling to absorb the water. So I'll just go through here, spray everything. So I'm going to go ahead and water everything, and then I'm going to come back and talk a little bit about fertilizer. Okay, before I continue, so I finished watering everything, I just want to make a quick point about my point about wanting them to dry out every day. So that is because of my setup allows for that. If your setup doesn't allow for that, that's totally fine. Let's say you're growing in an enclosed terrarium or something. In that case, you just want to make sure the plant gets fresh air, and that water eventually can evaporate. There are a couple species which will tolerate being soggy wet. Those are typically the thin leaf things like Calodictyon and Tentaculata for 2 examples. Those will probably be fine. But some of the ones with more robust leaves and thicker roots, if you have them soaking, there's a chance they might not do too well for you. And so, just wanted to get that out of the way. And now, talk a little about fertilizer. So for folks who really like to calculate and maximize their fertilizer applications, probably not gonna enjoy or agree with my advice with fertilizer. I tend to do it by feeling. Before I didn't really fertilize that much. I would fertilize maybe once a month or once every 2 months. Now I've switched to doing it every week. Just because I felt like it, as I said, feeling. I believe that it is better to under fertilize than to over fertilize, and my thought process for that is under fertilizing, the plant will struggle a little, and you'll see signs of that by like yellowing leaves and such. But when you over fertilize these plants specifically, and you burn their roots, you're screwing them in the long term. And so I think it's easier to recover from under fertilizing than it is from over fertilizing. And so I just want to get that out of the way. Fertilizing every week also requires that people do this thing called flushing. Essentially, you use pure water to run through the media to flush out excess nutrients that might not be taken away by the plant right away. Because I water every day, inherently that is like the media gets flushed every day, which is why I've recently switched to fertilizing once a week. Let's see, yeah. And so when I fertilize, I use a spray bottle this time, and typically one spray bottle will get me through like 1 week, or yeah, 2 weeks. So I'll fertilize twice with 1 bottle. And this is the part where it's like, how do you calculate this thing? So let me just grab my fertilizer. I'm using a 20-20-20 all-purpose because I have a 20-20 all-purpose for my garden. There's different types of fertilizers you can use that might be better or worse. Honestly, I'm not too concerned about that. And so there's instructions on the back, typically, on how much you want to dose. So this one says 5 houseplants, mix 1 teaspoon and 4 liters. So this is about, the spray bottle is about 1 liter. So you want to mix a teaspoon. I will just kind of eyeball, so there's a little spoon in here. You see this? I think this is a tablespoon.
Stop it!
My dog's being bad, sounds like. So I'll just kind of eyeball, you know, what feels right. Oh, there's a line in here that says teaspoon. So, sorry, I should say, I want to have less than what is recommended. And so usually I'll do like approximately half the dosage, recommended dosage. So that's probably like half a teaspoon. And then I'll mix that into my little bottle here. So let me open that up. One thing I do is I always mix this with pure water, so my RO / distilled water. So there's the powder in the bottom. And then I'll just close this up so it doesn't crystallize. So I'll use this water. I'll just fill it up. Just do it on camera here. You know, about 1 liter, whatever. Again, I said I don't really try and be too specific with this part. I feel like fertilizing is kind of like cooking, less so like baking. You know, you can kind of play it by feel, rather than really needing to follow very close instructions. That's just my opinion, though. There's probably folks that don't agree with that, but whatever. Alright, so I'll mix this up, and then I'll show you what I do. Okay, here we are. As you can see, the plants are just watered, and I will fertilize right after I water, typically. Let me just switch hands here. Okay. So I have my spray bottle here, and this is that pre-mixed weaker fertilizer solution. I'll just use, I'll just spray. And I want to spray onto the media. Half to a full spray. You can kind of gauge based off of the media, which plants use more, which plants might want less. That's the feeling part. So if there's less media, maybe give less fertilizer. More media, more fertilizer. Smaller plant, less fertilizer. Larger plant, more fertilizer. That kind of thing. And so I'll just go around the whole wall here, just kind of spraying everything, getting it on the roots. Sorry, this is like really hard to do with holding a camera. There's no, you can't see. Alright, so I'll go around and do this for the whole thing, and then I'll be back and show you step 2 of my fertilizing process. Woo, okay, welcome back. I have finished spraying my fertilizer mix. And then one thing I also do is I use some kind of kelp mix, I guess. And again, I just kind of eyeball a lower concentration than what the package suggests. I think kelp is supposed to have some kind of plant growth hormones in it that help improve cell division and such. But this stuff I will apply as a foliar. And so I keep the nozzle relatively tight so that it sprays out, and then I just, you know, go nuts. And see if I can capture that here. So where's that side? This side. So I'll just, you know, just give them a little spritz. Again, because I have a lot of fans, my leaves will dry off by the end of the day, so I'm not worried about too much leaf rot. And this spray bottle lasts a lot longer, because that's a lot less, despite what it looked like, that's a lot less actual solution than is applied with the fertilizer. Yeah, so this is just a kelp based. It's not a fertilizer. So if you read the nutritional breakdown or whatever, or yeah, mineral breakdown, there's no nitrogen in this. It's mostly, it says like potassium and like kelp extract or something like that. Yeah, kelp mix. And that's basically it for what I do in terms of fertilizing. And despite the precision of it, it's been pretty good, I think. You know, my plants have been growing well. Lots of leaves, lots of roots. So yeah, can't really argue with results, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I guess let me show you a couple things that are flowering now. Maybe less interesting to the Lepanthes people, but Pleurothylid people in general. Here's a Masdevallia Helgae. It's this really big flower here. Mine are kind of twisted because I have kind of weird lighting from the top and from the side. So if you see here, this is like a weird twisting going on, but really pretty plant. Some Lepanthes here. Here's a Tenuiloba. Here's another one. There's like a little bit of variation, which is nice. This one's a little more red, and this one's a little more yellow, so maybe we'll cross these as when the plants get a little bigger. This just bloomed for me too, Lepanthes pulchella. This one is, makes a lot of inflorescences, it doesn't bloom too often for me. Here's Lepanthes octavioi. Octavioi. Cool little yellow one. This one is pretty slow to develop inflorescences, but it blooms pretty regularly, I think. I think that's kind of all that's new this week from last week's update. But anyways, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I try to respond to most, if not all, comments. Just another reminder about the Discord server. That will be in the link below as well. And then you can ask like other people what they do as well, which I think is very valuable, knowing how other people grow things instead of just like one or two people, and then like trying different things that might work for you. Anyways, I appreciate the support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.